We spend a little time in this subject thinking about creativity and how to present the findings of our passage and to be able to relate it to a contemporary audience in a particularly creative kind of a way. And so in the notes we have some material on creativity and especially brainstorming. It'll be a little bit different for us doing this lecture in this format because I'm just here by myself, and normally I would do some of this on the whiteboard and there'd be a lot of interaction with the class. But I think maybe we'll still be able to get the idea across. So I want to take a look again at Habakkuk 3, verses 17 and 18, which I'll read again, and then just review what we had as a big idea for this passage. Though the fig tree should not blossom, and there be no fruit on the vines, though the yield of the olive should fail, and the fields produce no food, though the flock should be cut off from the fold, and there be no cattle in the stalls, yet I will exult in the Lord, I will rejoice in the God of my salvation. And what we could put together as a big idea for this passage, at least from the scripture itself, from the biblical point of view, is the proper response to the coming invasion. How should a person in the time of Habakkuk respond to this upcoming time of upheaval? And the answer to that is, it's to trust God who will deliver his people after a time of judgment that he's determined for them. So as we begin this brainstorming time of how we might communicate this message to today, it'd be helpful if we keep in mind this particular subject, and that's how faith responds to serious problems. How faith responds to serious problems. Now, we probably need to ask a couple questions in order to bring this from Habakkuk's time to our time. And one is, what might, if whatever could go wrong does go wrong, what does that look like for people today? And then a second question would be, what would unbelief look like? And related to that, what would belief look like? So one thing that when we're thinking of creativity and how we might communicate this concept to people, it might be helpful for us to think of a particular group. So we could think of working men, we could think of wives, mothers, we could think of young people, all kinds of categories, but let's just settle on young people, youth. So people in their teens, probably at school. What might it look like for them if whatever could go wrong did go wrong? And I just thought of at least three. We come up with a whole whiteboard full of things for this. But one would be is if a person is extremely unpopular in high school. Okay, that might be an example of something that could go wrong. Because in Habakkuk's time, he talked about the fig tree not blossoming, no fruit on the vines, no yield of the olive, the fields producing no food, no flocks, no cattle. And that's a little bit remote to where most of us live today. But for a young person, it would be these types of things. It would be, okay, I'm not a popular person. Maybe even that I'm getting bullied at school or something like that. Another possible problem would be parents becoming divorced or failing my subjects, failing my year 12 exams, something like that. And if we added all those together and even added some more, we'd probably be closer to what Habakkuk is talking about. What would it be like if whatever could go wrong did go wrong? Now, another question to ask here might be, what would be a possible negative reaction? What would be an unbelief reaction to a set of circumstances like that? We could think, okay, you're unpopular at school. What would be a wrong response to that? Could be to give in to peer pressure. Okay, if I'm not popular because of who I am, in fact, I'm looked down on, I'm bullied, I'm put down, well, I better change who I am, and that may involve changing important things about my character, about my beliefs, and about how I go about my life. That would be an unbelief response. If it was parents divorcing, perhaps the young people might respond to that by turning to alcohol or some other drug. And that would be an unbelief or a non-faith response. For a student to fail his subjects or her subjects, to fail their exams, some students might even turn to suicide. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to move from the world of the text to the world of today. And if you had a group that you were brainstorming with, you would probably come up with a lot more ideas than I had just given you. You might come up with different audiences. Another thing that you might want to do, you will want to do, is to think of what might be a possible slant that I could approach this creative paraphrase, or saying the same thing in another way, in a way that's quite creative. And I've thought of three. There's a lot more that we might do. One would be just to pretend to be a student keeping his diary or her diary. What would be the thoughts that a person in this situation would be having? How would they write those into a diary? That's one idea. Another one, because it's dealing with all kinds of problems, you might, if you're musically inclined or your audience is musical, you might want to take a country song or a blues song, sort of an angle, because both of those genres of music, blues and country, tend to deal with problems and tend to be responses to problems. So you could write a song where you put some of the thoughts of Habakkuk into a modern sort of format. And then one that I really liked that some of the students came up with a few years ago. You might not want to do this, depending on your view on dancing, but they suggested the idea of getting big cutouts or big squares of wood, and on each square of wood, painting out that particular problem. So painting unpopular, painting parents' divorce, painting failing subjects, failing exams, something like acne, loss of boyfriend, loss of girlfriend, and putting those out on the floor, making a dance floor with all of those problems, and then having a dance where you'd actually dance on the problems by faith, responding to that situation. Well, that's just a pretty short example of some things that you might be able to do in thinking through how to creatively teach, communicate the idea of Habakkuk 3:17 and 18.